15, the porch boards are still warm from the day. Your iced tea has begun to sweat a ring into the rail. Somewhere past the hostas, the light is going soft and gold, and you have maybe 9 good minutes before the first wine finds your ear. You know the sound. You know what comes after it. The slap. The second slap. The quiet retreat through the screen door at 7:15, summer after summer, for 30 years running. Now picture a small dented vessel on a flat stone at the edge of the grass, no flame. Just a thin, pale curl of smoke climbing straight up in the still air, slow as a held breath. $3 of what is already growing within 100 feet of most American houses. 6 feet away, a honeybee works the bee balm and never lifts her head. The dog on the boards never opens an eye. 12 minutes is what it took. The evening I am thinking of, some nights it is 8. If you are the kind of person who would rather learn what your grandfather knew than buy what a stranger in a warehouse is selling, sit with me a while. There is no rush in this one. Pour something cold, settle in, and if what I say here rings true to your bones, tap the little subscribe word under the screen so the next time I sit down with a tin can and a handful of dried weeds, the porch light comes on for you too. I want to be plain with you about what this is and what it is not. This is not a hack. This is not a hot new trick somebody invented for the internet last spring. This is a thing a man in Holmes County showed me one August evening with the patience of someone who had done it 1,000 times and never once thought it was clever. He called it by a word that does not translate cleanly into English, so I will not pretend to spell it. He set the pot down, he lit it, he sat, and the mosquitoes went somewhere else. I will tell you more about him later. For now, I want you to look at your own back porch. Look at the screen door you stop opening in July. Look at the citronella bucket from 2 summers ago, the wick already gone black and stubby. Look at the plug-in by the kitchen window with the little blue light. Look at the can of spray on the shelf above the washer, the one with the warning label so long it had to be folded twice. Count what is there. Count what it cost you. Most folks I have asked land somewhere north of $100 by August, and that is before the yard service shows up in a white truck with a wand. None of it was free, none of it was quiet, and most of it did not work the way it was promised to work. You already know that, or you would not be here. You learned it the way most of us learn things now, which is by paying for the lesson twice. Once at the register, once on the porch when the bracelet on your wrist did absolutely nothing for the back of your neck. Here's what I want to show you before this is over. I want to show you the pot. I want to show you what goes in the pot. I want to show you where to set it on the grass so the smoke does what smoke is supposed to do. I want to show you why the honeybee on the bee balm does not care, and why the old dog on the boards does not care, and why the mosquito, who is hunting you by a signal you cannot feel, suddenly cannot find you anymore. Then I will tell you the one honest thing this pot will not do, because anybody selling you a perfect answer is selling you something. The man in Holmes County did not use the word repellent. He did not use the word natural. He did not use any of the words the candle aisle has worn smooth. What he used was a small dark vessel, a handful of dry stems off his fence line, a pinch of something soft and gray off the rafters of his shed, and a single wooden match he struck on the side of his thumbnail without looking. He worked the way men work when they have done a thing so many times their hands move ahead of their thoughts. He never once swatted his own neck while I was there. Now I owe you the honest hedge early because that is how my father taught me to talk. 12 minutes is what it took that night. On a damp, still night, I have watched the same setup work in under 6. On a breezy night, I have watched it take 20. And on the worst kind of night, when the wind keeps shifting from the creek bottom, I have watched it not quite finish the job at all. So when you hear a flat number on the internet about how long something takes to clear a yard, you should already be reaching for your salt. The truth has weather in it. The truth has wind in it. The truth never holds perfectly still. What the truth does hold is the shape of the thing. The shape of the thing is older than the spray aisle by a few centuries at least. Long before anyone could afford a window screen, long before the word insecticide was printed on a label, farm families in this country and in the country my grandmother came from were burning small piles of plant matter at the edge of the dooryard at dusk. They called it different names in different counties. The plain folks have their word for it. The Appalachian families I knew growing up just called it a smudge. The mechanic was the same everywhere. A slow ember, a particular handful of leaves, a vessel that would not tip in the dew. The reason you have never heard about it on television is not a mystery, and it is not a conspiracy either. It is simpler than that, and in some ways it is worse than that. You cannot put a recurring charge on a handful of dried stems. You cannot ship a coffee can with holes in it to a distribution center and turn it into a product line. There is no quarterly earnings call for what grows wild along a fence row. The kind of company that profits when you are afraid of your own backyard does not profit when you walk out into it with a tin can and a match. So you were never told, not because anyone hid it on purpose, because nobody stood to make a dollar by telling you, and in this country, for a long time now, that has been the same thing as silence. Sit with me at a kitchen table for a minute and let us do the arithmetic out loud, the way my father used to do it on the back of a feed store receipt. 2 cans of spray at $8 a piece, because one is never enough and one always rolls under the truck seat. A citronella bucket at 14, a pack of replacement wicks at 6, a bug zapper bulb at 11, a bracelet for the grandkids at $4 times 3 children because you cannot give one and not the other two, a yard service that quoted you 90 for a single fogging and 160 for the season. We are already past 200 and it is only the 4th of July. That is the money. The money is not the real bill. The real bill is the porch you stopped sitting on. The real bill is the cookout you moved indoors. The real bill is your wife in long sleeves in the tomato patch in the middle of July, sweating through cotton because the alternative is welts. The real bill is the grandchildren called inside at 7 because the bites swell up worse on the little ones, and you remember being their age and staying out until the lightning bugs came up, and you cannot quite explain to them why it is different now. It is not different. The mosquitoes have not gotten worse. We have gotten more afraid, and somebody figured out how to sell us the fear back to us in 8-ounce cans. I want to be careful how I say this next part, because I am not here to name a company, and I am not here to make an enemy out of anyone who works for one. There are good men and good women in every industry, and the fellow loading the truck at the chemical plant has a mortgage like the rest of us. What I am pointing at is not a person. It is a shape. It is the shape of a business model that took something our great-grandparents handled with a smoldering bundle at the edge of the yard and turned it into a recurring subscription. They did not invent the mosquito. They invented the dependence. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole story. Now let me give you back the Man in Holmes County because I owe him to you. His shed smelled like leather and old harness oil and the inside of a wood stove that had been cold for a week. He kept the pot on a low shelf next to a coffee tin full of horseshoe nails. When the ash built up on the rim, he would tap it off with one of those nails, 3 quick taps, never 4, and set the nail back in the tin without looking. He told me, the way he told it, that his grandfather had burned the same mix in the same kind of can during what he called the polio summers, when nobody on his road wanted standing water near a porch, and every family on the lane had a smudge going at dusk. I cannot prove any of that. I am telling you the way he told it, which is the only honest way I know to pass a thing like this along. What I can tell you, because it is in any county library that still has a local history shelf, is that smudging plants against biting insects is older than this republic. The native nations did it. The Scots-Irish farmers who came down through the Cumberland Gap did it. The German families who settled the Pennsylvania bottomland did it. The men who fought in the swamps of 2 world wars came home and did it on their own back lawns before deed ever existed as a word. It is not a secret. It is not exotic. It is one of the most ordinary pieces of working knowledge in the history of people living near water in the summertime, and somewhere between your grandfather's porch and yours, it got buried under 1,000 television commercials and a few thousand laminated labels. Here is where the wedge goes in, and I want you to hold on to this because the rest of what I tell you depends on it. The cans on the shelf at the hardware store are built to do one of 2 things. They either coat your skin in a chemical that the mosquito will not land on, or they put a poison in the air that kills the mosquito when she gets close enough. Contact or ingestion. Those are the 2 doors the modern bug aisle knows how to open. The old smoke pot does neither one. It does something different, and the difference is the reason the bee on the bee balm does not care. The female mosquito, which is the one that bites you, does not find you by sight. She does not find you by sound. She finds you by the carbon dioxide you breathe out, by the lactic acid on your skin, by the warm, wet plume of air that lifts off a human being on a summer evening. She is hunting a signal. She is following a trail you cannot see and cannot stop making as long as you are alive. The cheap pot at the edge of your grass does not kill her. It does not even really repel her in the way the label on a can means that word. It hides you. Many old field guides and homesteaders describe it as masking the scent she is hunting you by. The smoke lays a soft curtain between your warm breath and the open yard, and the trail she was following simply goes blank. That is why the bee does not care. The bee is not hunting you. The dog is not hunting you. The bird in the dogwood is not hunting you. Nothing in your yard that you actually want there is following the carbon dioxide on your breath. Only the female mosquito is, and only she goes blind when the smoke comes up. I will not tell you the pot is magic, because nothing real ever is. I will tell you the fix is older than the problem they sold you, and the reason it still works is the same reason it worked in 1880. The mosquito has not changed her mind about what she is hunting. We are the only ones who forgot. So let us build the thing. You will need a vessel, and you almost certainly already own one. A small cast iron pot is the best of the three options because cast iron holds the heat steady and will outlive your grandchildren. An old metal coffee can with a dozen holes punched near the rim with a 16-penny nail is what most farms actually had on hand, and it is what I would tell you to start with if you have never done this before. A clay flower pot turned right side up with a square of window screen across the mouth is the one to use if you have small children running the yard, because the outside of the clay never gets hot enough to burn a curious palm. Pick the one that fits your life. None of them is wrong. The base layer goes in first, and it is the part most folks get wrong because they reach for the wrong thing. You want a thin bed of hardwood charcoal, the kind you would put in a cookout grill, or a small handful of dry punky wood off a long dead oak limb. You do not want paper. You do not want kindling. You do not want anything that wants to flame. The whole game here is smolder, not fire. A flame burns the medicine off in 2 minutes flat and leaves you with a hot, empty can. A slow red ember releases the same medicine over 20 steady minutes and lays a curtain across your yard while you sit and watch the light go. Now the plant mix, and this is the part you have been waiting on. The working combination that most homesteaders I know land on after a few summers is dried sage, dried rosemary stems with the leaves still on, a small handful of dried lavender if your wife grows it by the kitchen step, and a pinch of dried citronella grass or lemon balm to carry the scent. That is the everyday version. The plain families I have sat with often add dried mugwort or pennyroyal because both grow wild along their fence lines for free, and the pennyroyal in particular is what gives the old pots their bite. I have to stop here and tell you the truth about pennyroyal. The oil of it is strong stuff. Keep it away from pregnant women and away from cats, full stop. That is the kind of detail the candle aisle never put on a label, and I am not going to skip past it just because it complicates the recipe. The lighting is its own small craft, and it is where most first-timers fail. You light the base layer only. You let the charcoal or the punky wood catch and glow a steady red, the way coals look in a wood stove 20 minutes after you close the door. Then, and only then, you lay the herb mix on top, gently, like you are tucking a child in. The herbs should never flame. If you see a yellow tongue come up, you have too much air or too dry a leaf, and you lift the herbs with a stick and feather a pinch of cool ash over the spot. The pot should breathe out a steady pale smoke that climbs straight up in still air. If it is climbing fast and white, you are burning. If it is barely there in gray, you are smoldering, and you are doing it right. Where you put the pot matters as much as what is in it. This is the part the magazine articles always leave out. You do not set the pot next to your chair. You set it upwind of where you are sitting, anywhere from 8 to 15 feet off, so that whatever breeze the evening has is carrying the smoke across the space between you and the open yard. The mosquito is coming up the same air you are breathing, and the smoke has to be standing in the doorway when she arrives. On a still night, I will set 2 pots in a soft line about 10 paces apart, and the 2 of them together will hold a quarter-acre well enough to play cards on the porch until full dark. On a breezy night, I move the pot every 15 minutes as the wind shifts. You learn the geometry of your own yard by sitting in it. I want to slip something quiet in here before we move on, because the kind of folks who watch a thing like this all the way through are the kind of folks who keep the old ways from dying out with the last people who remember them. If that is you, and I suspect it is, you already know what to do with the little subscribe word at the bottom of the screen. I will not ask you twice, and I will not make a speech about it. I just would rather you were here the next time I sit down with a tin can and a handful of dried weeds, that is all. Now back to the pot, because I owe you the answer to the question that brought a lot of you here in the first place. Why does the bee on the bee balm not care? Why does the dog on the boards not care? The short answer is the one I gave you a little while back, and now I will give you the long one. Bees do not hunt by carbon dioxide. Dogs do not hunt by carbon dioxide. Songbirds do not hunt by carbon dioxide. The smoke from a properly built smudge pot is not a poison, and it is not a nerve agent, and it is not a contact killer. It is a soft confusion laid across one specific sense of one specific insect. The bee keeps working. The dog keeps sleeping. The mosquito, for a little while, goes blind. That is gentler on a pollinator and a pet than what comes out of a fogger, and that is the most I will claim. Smoke is still smoke. Keep the pot away from a birdcage on the porch. Keep it out of a closed sunroom. Keep it where the sky is the ceiling, and you will be fine. Here's the honest limit, because I promised you one, and I do not break that kind of promise. The smoke pot will not clear a swamp. It will not work in a stiff wind off the river. It will not save you if you have a kiddie pool full of green water behind the shed, or a clogged gutter holding an inch of standing rain along the eave of the garage, or an old tire out in the weeds full of last week's storm. Half of the mosquito problem in any American backyard is a standing water problem, and no smoke on earth fixes a neglected gutter. So tomorrow morning, before you build the pot, walk your yard with a coffee cup in your hand and tip out every container you find holding water. Then gather your herbs over 2 evenings this week. Then light the pot at dusk on Friday and sit there long enough to notice you have stopped reaching for your neck. You are not behind on anything. You did not waste your money on the sprays because you were foolish. You spent it because every voice that was supposed to help you was paid to sell you something instead, and you did the best you could with the information you were given. That is what most of us did. What you are doing right now, sitting through a long, quiet talk from a stranger about a tin can and a handful of dried weeds, is the beginning of getting some of that ground back. You are not alone in it. There is a long line of people in this country quietly remembering, late but in time, that the answers were never expensive and were never complicated, and that the people who told us otherwise had a reason. Welcome to the line. There is room for one more on the bench. The next time I sit down with you, I want to show you a quart jar my grandmother kept under the kitchen sink in a house outside Lancaster. 3 ingredients, no label, no lid that ever quite fit right. She used a teaspoon of it on her cast iron every Sunday night after supper, and that skillet went 41 years in a Pennsylvania cellar without a speck of rust on it. I have the skillet on my own stove now, and I will bring it out for you when we sit down again. Until then, tell me in the comments what your people burned, hung from the rafters, or planted along the steps to keep the bugs off the porch on summer evenings. Tell me what your grandmother swore by, even if you thought at the time she was being foolish. I read every one of them, and half of what I know now I learned from the comments under videos like this one. The smoke is still rising. The bee is still working. Sit a while longer if you like. The light is not quite gone yet.